So you decided to go to grad school for psychology. Tell me more. Dear future therapists, I'm Gabriella and welcome to my YouTube channel. Let's talk about getting into grad school, specifically for psychology. There's applications, deadlines, personal statements, letters of rec, accreditations, choosing a program, choosing a degree, a PsyD, a PhD, a master's, cost, location, deadlines. Did I say that already? It's a lot. In this episode, we're going to unpack all of that, and then I'm going to give you some tips and tricks and things that I did when I applied to my master's program that I'm currently enrolled in right now. Hopefully by the end of this video, it'll alleviate some of the stress and overwhelm that naturally comes from applying to a grad school program, or maybe it'll just add to it. But anyways, let's be positive. So the first thing to probably consider before applying to any grad school program, which by the way is something I never thought I would do. I had a lot of student loans in undergrad. I went to a very expensive undergrad, and I promised myself I would never do this again. But here we are. Can you feel my anxiety through the screen, just like palpitating through my bones? No? Okay, good, we're good. And when I was going through the process of applying to programs and trying to decide what I wanted to do, I found a lot of helpful insight online, on YouTube, in books, talking to other psychotherapists and people in the field. I talked to my own therapist. I'll tell you what she said, maybe in another video, because that's a whole thing. But I wanted to come on here and just share my experience, and hopefully it will help with the process. The first thing to consider when applying to a grad school program in psychology is your why. I talked about my why in the previous video, and that really comes down to doing some self-reflective work. Why do you want to go to school? What purpose is this fulfilling for you professionally and otherwise in the long term? The second thing to consider is what type of program you want to apply to and what type of degree you want. Do you want a PhD program that's more research-based? Maybe you want a PsyD that's more focused on clinical work. Do you want a master's degree because you are just in a hurry to get in, get out, get licensed, and start your practice? So that's something to consider. And there's a lot of pros and cons. There's a lot of pros and cons to both options. I looked into several PhD programs, PsyD programs, master's programs. Ultimately, I decided on an MA because I was definitely in the category of I want to get finished with school as quickly as possible. I considered the cost of tuition that would inevitably result from being in a program that was 5 to 6 years long, and I settled on a 2-year program for my master's degree. One resource that helped me decide on what program I wanted for myself was this book called Getting In, a step-by-step plan for gaining admission to graduate school in psychology. This is the second edition. Maybe there's a later edition. Recommend checking it out, because even though this was several years old, there was still a lot of really relevant information in here. And yeah, I know there's the internet and there's copious amounts of research you can do online to answer a lot of these questions, but I find the World Wide Web to be a bit oversaturated, and sometimes it could take you down rabbit holes that aren't actually helpful. So it was nice to have all the information that I needed distilled into this one book. And you don't even have to read the whole thing. You can skip from chapter to chapter based on what it is that you are needing help with, whether it's writing a personal statement, considering what accreditations are important to you, or whether it's looking at what type of career you want to have, because there are so many different types of careers you can have in the psychology field. It'll also take you through filling out grad school applications, etc. It helped me out a lot. Hope it helps you out too. Once you do start researching programs, obviously go to their website, look at the application requirements, look at deadlines, and see what kind of timelines you're working with so you don't miss a deadline for a spring quarter that you want to jump into. The third thing is, when you do start researching programs, go to the school's website, look at the admission requirements, and start jotting down deadlines. I made like a pseudo spreadsheet. I kind of just created a Word document with bullet points for each program that I was interested in, with deadlines, tuition costs. But for the most part, you're going to be looking at what type of prerequisites they require or don't require, how many letters of recommendation they require, what the prompt is for the personal statement. When I first started writing my personal statements, I thought I could just write a general one-size-fits-all personal statement. That is not the case. So you may want to go ahead and start looking at prompts and just start brainstorming ideas of what you would write about versus writing a general personal statement and then not being able to use it for any of your programs because it doesn't answer the prompt. So don't do that. Another thing to consider in admission requirements is GPA. Yes, unfortunately, you're going to have to go through the treacherous process of requesting a transcript from your alma mater. In my case, it had been several years since I had graduated from undergrad, so I had no idea what my transcripts said. I didn't know what my GPA was. I was pleasantly surprised it wasn't as bad as I thought. It was good. I had a good GPA. Most of these schools aren't expecting a 4.0 unless you're applying to an Ivy League. So usually a 3.0 or somewhere within that range is acceptable. But requesting your transcripts is definitely something that you can do early to kind of get the ball rolling. The fourth thing, if it is it the fourth thing? I don't know. Look at getting any relevant experience you might need. For my master's program, they didn't require any relevant experience. I had a smidgen of something that I included on my resume when I was applying to grad school. I had some experience staffing a women's retreat that involved meditation and group therapy, so I included that. But most of my professional experience had absolutely nothing to do with psychology, so don't let that deter you. However, if you are applying to a competitive PhD program, that is probably not the case. I sat in at UCLA's online open house, and they definitely required relevant experience. So they basically told me if I wanted to apply to that program, I should probably take a year off and do some volunteer work in a community mental health organization or something similar if that was something that I wanted to apply to. Thankfully, that wasn't something that I wanted to do, but if I had wanted to go that route, that's what I would be looking at, maybe a year and a half break to just get that experience. So before you start applying to these schools, make sure you know what relevant experience, if any, they require. The fifth thing on my list is letters of recommendation, basically like a academic Yelp review. This one was a real headache for me personally because I was so far removed from undergrad that I didn't have any academic references. So I reached out to people in my professional life, colleagues of mine, and I got them to write me some glowing academic Yelp reviews. But if you do have access to people in your academic world, a lot of programs prefer those types of recommendations, but if you don't, no worries. I absolutely didn't. I reached out to my talent manager. I reached out to a former boss who was a producer on a show I worked at. I reached out to a creative collaborator of mine who I've done some writing and production work with. So the types of mentors, supporters, teachers, professional colleagues you reach out to can vary greatly. It was never an issue that I didn't have an academic reference, and I stressed out about that for way too long unnecessarily. Also, pro tip, ask for recommendation letters early because people have lives. You don't want those letters to be rushed. You want people to take their time and put you in the best light as possible. So the sixth thing is personal statements. I think I touched on this already, but basically you want to make sure that you tailor your responses to the specific application of that program. These programs are looking to see your authentic voice, that you have overcome adversity, that you have depth, that you are a real human being, and generally they ask some sort of question about why you want to become a psychotherapist, a psychologist, or whatever it is. So you're going to want to take a little more time on it than you would your Hinge bio, for example. Make it swipe worthy, but deeper. So number 7 on my list is interviews. A lot of these grad schools are going to request some type of interview. Mine were all via Zoom. Some were more engaging and more in depth than others. One of the things that set the program that I ultimately chose apart from some of the other schools I applied to 4 in total, was the interview process. They were asking smart questions. I think they even gave us like a clinical case scenario to dissect, and they looked at it was a group interview, and they gave us all an opportunity to share ideas and insight in terms of how we would address this particular case study. And I thought that was a really cool opportunity to kind of show the level of our curiosity, our depth, and our passion for applying to that particular program. I'm someone who really enjoys the interview process, and that's an area I think where I thrive. So it was really important to me that that experience was a positive one. But if interviews are something that make you nervous or uncomfortable, then definitely make sure that you're prepared going in. do the work of researching the program that you're interviewing for, understand their values, so that you can reflect back some of that knowledge and they know that you're someone to be taken seriously. Okay, so the last thing on my list is cost and location. So as I was creating my Word document with my bullet list of all the different programs, all the different things that I liked, didn't like, pros, cons, one of the most important bullet points on the list was tuition costs. I found that on some of these websites, it's really hard to get a clear answer for what the cost of tuition is because most grad schools will only give you the cost per unit. So then you have to go look and see, well, what is the total number of units required for graduation, and then do the math. You ultimately have to decide for you what type of investment you want to make. When it comes to the location of the school, consider things like, will you have to relocate? What will the costs be involved with relocation? Will you have to commute? How long is that commute? How many hours a week are you willing to dedicate to that commute? Disclosure, I grew up in LA. I fought traffic for years. I am not about the commute. And that's a whole other can of worms, whether or not you want to do school online or in person. I decided to do the online route and I couldn't be happier, but that's a whole other conversation for another video. One last thing I have to throw in, and this is probably one of the most important things to consider when you're applying to a program, is accreditation. This was a very confusing thing to navigate at first because accreditation varies from region to region, from program to program. So it's gonna look different if you're applying to a PhD program or if you're applying to a master's program. In my case, for the master's program that I'm currently enrolled in, I decided to go with a CACREP accredited school. It's a mouthful of an acronym. It stands for Council for Accreditation of Counseling and Related Educational Programs. But if you're looking at PhD programs and your goal is to become a doctor of psychology, then you're gonna wanna look at schools that are accredited by APA, which is the American Psychological Association. Even though I decided to go with a CACREP accredited program, there are multiple types of accreditations, so it's really important to do that research and make sure that your program is the best fit for you in terms of value and quality of education because you're spending all this freaking money. Sorry, I'm a little scarred from my undergrad loans, which I've paid off, but still. We talked about figuring out your why, deciding on a program, researching admission requirements, getting relevant experience if necessary, getting your letters of recommendation, working on a badass personal statement, preparing for interviews, and considering cost and location and accreditation. And oh yeah, remember to breathe. Or vomit. Whatever works for you. I know this can be a really overwhelming and stressful time. I was there not too long ago, but I just want to say I'm proud of you. Leave a comment if you have any questions about this videos or if you just want to vent about the process of applying to grad school. And please subscribe if you want to see more content like this. Dear future therapists, I'm Gabriella. Remember to breathe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.